Okay, so we're a couple minutes past, so we want to go ahead and get started. And I'm excited to talk about today's topic where we're going to be looking at Google Workspace, JumpCloud, how you can integrate the two, and really what does that mean when you're building a cloud-forward tech stack for remote work. So just a quick high-level view of what we're going to be talking about and some housekeeping. So as you have questions, feel free to throw those into the question area. We will be addressing a lot of those towards the end, so that way you can have a little bit more of a dialogue. We'll do a quick introduction to today's speakers, and we'll be talking a little bit about, outside of just the name change, what was that like to go from G Suite to Workspace? What does that look like now that our modern workplace is these workspaces? And then finally, from a technical view, what does it look like to integrate all of those different components of an identity into Google Workspace so that way you can manage your remote work at scale? So now, just a quick introduction to folks. And so I'm right here on the right, and this is Chase. This is what I look like when I've had plenty of coffee. But more importantly, what we have here with us today is Austin and Pippa. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Austin, if you'd like to start.
Looks like Austin might be muted, so I can kind of take the reins here. Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Pippa Saunders. I'm an account executive at Google, and I'm primarily focused on net new acquisitions for Google Workspace. So thank you all for the time today. And then Austin, let's see if your mic is working this time.
Yep, I'm working now. Thanks, Pippa and Chase, and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So my name is Austin Hume, and I am a G Suite / Google Workspace account manager here at Google. I've been at Google for 4 years, and I've spent about 2.5 of those years being account manager on my current team. My main focus is helping current customers get the most out of their G Suite / Google Workspace subscription and make sure that they are on the plan that not only suits their current needs, but also their future needs. So in the next few slides, I'll be speaking a little bit about the current status of the workspace and then how Google is helping organizations prepare for that change. Next slide, please. One more. Perfect. So there's no doubt that the last year has brought tremendous change to how people work. COVID-19 has changed the way businesses work and, more importantly, how people work. So work is no longer a place. It can be done from anywhere, whether that's in an office, your own home, even an RV, since that's become the more popular thing to do over the last 12 to 18 months. But recent surveys show that a lot of people never plan to go back to work if given the option, and a lot of people also plan to do so on a limited basis, whether that be a hybrid model or week on, week off. But the main takeaway here is that organizations need flexible solutions that make it easy to work securely and from anywhere. As the workspace becomes a little bit more fragmented, it's crucial not to lose that human connection that we all once had when we were in the office. So we spend most of our times on screens, whether it's TV, phone, computer, you name it. But making time to meet in person has been difficult the last 12 to 18 months, and it's going to remain difficult moving forward, especially as some people prefer to stay at home or go into the office on a limited basis. So organizations will need solutions that make it easy for people to stay connected so that human interaction is not lost. And next slide, please. So as most of you know, or maybe not all of you know, but Google has recently rebranded from G Suite to Google Workspace. Although the timing of the rebrand was not intentional to align with COVID and kind of the massive changes that really brought to the workspace, it has allowed and in some cases forced organizations to stay nimble and really reassess their productivity and collaboration tools. Next slide, please. Some of the most common conversations I've had with other IT professionals, in the last 6-12 months have really been around, hey, Austin, how can I secure my devices now that all my end users are working remotely? How can I make sure that sensitive data is not leaving my organization while my end users work remotely? Hey, Austin, we need a video conferencing solution that allows us to come together as we continue to work remotely. We really want to record and save some of those meetings. And Google Workspace has really made some of those conversations easy, and it really allowed some of these customers and organizations to, one, stay nimble, and two, really transform their organization digitally. So in the past, we had 3 separate G Suite plans that you'll see on the left-hand side: G Suite Basic, G Suite Business, and G Suite Enterprise. With this rebrand, we now have 6 separate plans spread across 2 different product families. I'm not going to go in feature dump here, but if you are interested in taking a look at a detailed plan comparison after this webinar, I've provided one to Chase and his team that we can certainly share out after. But just to highlight a little bit more about the rebrand, the rebrand has brought a lot more flexibility to the licensing options, given the amount of plans that we now offer. So we used to offer 3, now we offer 6. Some of the features that were maybe once reserved for G Suite Enterprise or G Suite Business have now been dropped down into the business family plans, which has made it, one, more affordable to take advantage of some of those features rather than being required to jump all the way to the enterprise level plans. And there are options to also mix and match license types, given that not all end users, require the same license. So customers have responded very positively to this change and the flexibility that this change has brought, given the kind of changes with the workspace have been well received. Quick note on the 2 different product families. The business product family is primarily reserved for organizations that have between 1 and 300 users, while the enterprise plans include everything that each business family plan provides, but they do provide more robust security features like data loss prevention, malware detection, and provide just security insights into potential security threats an organization may be facing. Like I mentioned above, if you are interested in seeing a detailed plan comparison of each plan, we'll make sure to follow up after that. And with that, I'll hand off to Chase.
All right, well, thank you. And so now I just wanted to spend the next few minutes talking about all of that and more, right? So kind of what is a modern workplace, and now how do we transform that into our digital workspace when we're thinking about that? Because the office is changing, right? And for a lot of us, this has been kind of a constant state of flux, with a few of us now kind of maybe coming back into the office, and what does that look like from our type of environment? And for a long time, we've actually been saying, well, actually the new commute is domainless. And even though we have, maybe some of us actually have started to have a real commute again, and what that looks like, the underlying principles of kind of how we're thinking about that identity in kind of this new domainless model still remain true regardless of where you're coming from. And so what does domainless mean? And so when you kind of hear us talk about this domainless enterprise model, really what we mean is it's a lack of a traditional security perimeter. The employee and their device, well, that's the new perimeter now, right? And so that is now the mini domain that you're thinking about. And it might not be on a company controlled network. It might not even be on a company managed device. So how do you think about all of those different components around the identity, regardless of where they are? And this is true because we're kind of thinking about this brick and mortar type of model, right? Where we kind of have the known secure, and we've transitioned now into this remote work where it's domainless. We're understanding where employees are going. And a lot more organizations are focusing on this, and actually through a lot more employees requesting and kind of looking for organizations that support this remote type of work, because that's where they feel comfortable. And so now you're kind of managing both of these worlds and how they're coming together in almost like a hybrid model, right? And so how can you take advantage of a lot of the things that we've known over time, but then also how are you able to leverage that in the new modern way of thinking about zero trust identities and all of those different components. And so for us, when we're thinking about securing identities and operating in this new world, there's really kind of 4 main components how we're thinking about this. And the first, arguably the most important is that person really who they say they are, right? Where did that identity come from? Where was it built? Where was it sourced? And now that we understand who that identity is, what about the device? Is it healthy? Is it secure? Do we own it? Do they own it? Where does that live kind of within our fleet management, if you will? And now that we're opening up the lid and kind of operating that identity, well, what about the network path, right? Are they authenticating through radius authentication within the office? Are they out of the office? Do they need VPN? What does that look like? Should we add some whitelisting IP labels? How do we manage all of that network access? And then finally, underpinning a lot of these different components is not only the identity and the authentication, but also the authorization. So are we giving the right level of privileges to that user? Do they really need to have sudo access? Do they really need to be into our DevOps environment, right? Is there ways that we can add in additional layers of MFA if they're trying to get into their AWS or GCP instances? All of those different components kind of combine into how we think about a modern identity operating in this modern world. What this also gives rise to, then on the other side, so even now, all of our users are operating in this domainless model, kind of wherever they are. The other side of the coin is admins are also operating that way, right? And so how can we build organizations and security infrastructure around these kind of two modes so that way, no matter where you are, you can operate and handle the lifecycle of these identities properly. And this is important, right? And it's kind of gaining traction because we're realizing that, essentially 3/4 of security failures come from the mismanagement of these identities, the access, and the types of privileges that they have. And this is a growing concern, even from last year. So you can start to see all of these different pieces coming into play and how important it is to kind of fine tune what those privileges of those identities are and kind of where people are accessing all of that information. So now, how do we think about those different components of an integrated identity? And now how do we bring it back into what we were talking about earlier around operating within a Google Workspace environment? What does that mean to kind of have access to all the different resources within Workspace, but then everything else outside of it? So for a lot of us, might be thinking, well, kind of Workspace, it kind of operates over there in its own different identity. But now I wanted to take a couple minutes to explain kind of how we can take that identity and now transform that and use that for networking authentication, how we can use that for device authentication, and then also authenticating into other applications outside of that, all without disturbing our new office mates that we might have acquired. So I'll present it here in kind of a two-up mode of kind of looking at it from this type of perspective. And when you're looking to the right, I mean, a lot of organizations, might be where they start that identity, right? For a lot of smaller startups or organizations, kind of starts with an email, right? And that's kind of when it feels real and you kind of, okay, I've taken it. And one of the great things about our integration is that we're able to actually pull in that identity that's already been created within Workspace. And so that way there's no work lost. And now what we're able to do is take that identity that you've created and now add it into the JumpCloud platform. And this is really helpful because then you're able to take that same identity and drop it down onto different types of devices. So now you have a Workspace identity on Mac, and Windows, and Linux devices. You can also take that into other SSO applications. That way it can carry through outside of kind of the Google suite. And then finally, underpinning all of this too is making sure that you're able to access that correctly, right? And through kind of a radius authentication and other pieces on the network. And so what happens over time is actually you realize that there isn't that much of a barrier kind of between how and what this identity can do between the two organizations. And it's a little bit more perforated, a little bit more, it's able to flow. Now, the next fun component where I'll talk a little bit more specifically around the integration is we actually have an authoritative integration. What I mean by that is as you're creating those identities within JumpCloud, you're also creating those identities within your Workspace environment. And this is really helpful as you're onboarding new employees. You kind of have one-stop shop of kind of where that identity is created and sourced, but then it also ripples out into everything else that that person needs to get their work done. Now, the other bonus around this too is kind of when you're thinking about, we're also able to send in group management through that integration. So if you, as you're building groups within JumpCloud, or, I like to think about it, as your authentication architecture, right? Of, who has access to what across all of these different groups, that's actually able to be transcribed now into your Workspace environment. And we're also able to operate across multiple different workspaces. Now, this is really helpful for organizations that might be consolidating or acquiring a couple other organizations, or just different offices that might have started at different times. And so now you're able to take all of these different components of different aspects around identity and combine them into one cohesive UI, regardless of where they are and regardless of where you are. Now, I want to take a couple minutes to talk about the other side of this equation, which is offboarding and kind of managing that holistic life cycle of a secure identity. And this is important too, because as organizations start to evolve, you realize there's actually quite a bit of company IP and other things that are built between these different resources, right? Important emails, where people are at in their calendars, other important documents that might be saved in Drive or Vault or kind of other areas And how do we manage all of those different components? And so when we're thinking about access and what this identity can touch across the totality of their organization, really what we want to do when we suspend that user is able to suspend them across the entire platform all at once. And so we're able to revoke that local profile from the device, kind of removing it from there. We're able to revoke that authorization through other applications, and then also finally through networking access. And then through the Google Workspace identity, it's actually, what we like to say is kind of it's a soft pause, right? And so email will continue to flow through, and so there's still business continuity, but that identity and that source login has been removed. So that way, no matter where they are and kind of the different types of access that they're looking for, they're able to be removed across the platform. And so again, this is really helpful for those location agnostic admins, right? When you're thinking about managing the holistic lifecycle of onboarding and offboarding, not only saving time in managing those identities, but also leveraging that direct integration between the two organizations. So that way, as you're looking at a holistic security structure and kind of as we're operating in this new domainless remote work type of style work, that it doesn't matter where you are because you're able to manage and kind of fine tune all of those different aspects of identity, of understanding who the person is, understanding where the device is and who has ownership and kind of what levels of privileges you have across all those different pieces, the networking authentication, and really fine tuning and managing that authorization across so many of those precious resources. Because again, that's where kind of the biggest security hole is for a lot of us as we're thinking about what we're able to access when and who is able to access all of those different pieces. So to kind of wrap it up and kind of talk a little bit more cohesively about this, so again, we have this authoritative integration where we're able to provide a lot of those identities directly into that, and then also take that same identity across multiple OSs, across different secure networks, and then finally across multiple different domains, so that way it scales with you. One of the other pieces that I guess I'll mention very quickly is for those who might not know, we also have a multi-tenant aspect to JumpCloud as well. So you can think about this not only within multiple domains workspaces within Google, but also different organizations across JumpCloud as well. So that way we're able to scale kind of no matter how you're thinking about operating in this new world and kind of this domainless infrastructure. So thank you so much for joining us. I know that I've been chatting for a bit now, and so we do want to open it up to questions, kind of have a little bit more of a dialogue. And for those who are listening on the recording, we encourage you to stay. But thank you so much. We're actually transitioning into a couple of those questions now. So one of the questions that just came in is, very aptly, how does this compare to Office 365? I guess I can take the first piece of this, and we do have a similar integration with Office 365, but I think there's a lot more components in terms of feature functionality. So I don't know, Austin or Pippa, if you might have some insight there.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So really the biggest differences between Google and Office 365 or Microsoft, I think at the end of the day, right, a lot of people are just looking for an email and file storage and whatever. And both of those platforms, yes, they do contain that. The kind of difference of why Google here, I kind of boiled down to 3 reasons. So number one is security. Our security is backed by Google Cloud's leading and robust infrastructure. So we have a lot of white papers, a lot of stuff that's been done on the security front there. And if you guys are aware and have been part of the Microsoft environment for a while, then I'm sure you guys are no stranger to the security leaks that they've had. Number 2 is ease of use. So Google is a really user-friendly and intuitive platform. Google is, our goal is to design products that are easy to use. So for example, we have 1.5 billion plus users on Gmail, and then countless others using like a Google search, a YouTube, other products like that in their everyday lives. So when it comes to change management, of course, there's going to be change management. We don't want to discredit that, but At the end of the day, the products are very, very intuitive to use. And then last kind of bullet point here is just about company growth. So right now we have, I believe it's well over 90 million users currently on the Google Workspace for Education plan. So really the incoming workforce is accustomed to using this platform. For example, all of the Ivy Leagues right now, they're on also the Google Workspace for Education plan as well. So, when it comes to recruiting that incoming person in the workforce, they're all using Google Works.
Perfect. One other question came up. It looks like we have a couple from both sides, but so the first is kind of, how do you find what subscription you're on currently? I'd say from the Workspace side, especially now that it's kind of evolved into these multiple plans. And so maybe if you want to quickly just talk about what that looks like.
Yeah, I can take that one. So if you're a current G Suite customer or Google Workspace customer, and you are a admin on your account, simply log into your admin console. There's going to be a bunch of tiles. One of those tiles will be a billing tile. Click on that billing tile. It'll show you exactly what subscription you have, whether it's a flexible plan, annual plan, how many users you have, when renewal dates are. So that billing tile will give you all the detailed information that you need about your current plan. If you have an account manager like myself, you can also reach out to us and we'll be happy to share a little bit more about the plan as well.
Perfect. And then we also had one from, I'd say, the JumpCloud side of things, right? And so what plan of JumpCloud is needed for this type of integration? So I can take that. And actually, this is covered across all of our packages. And so for us, the ability to kind of import and manage those users is very core to kind of how we're thinking about operating cloud directory. And so this is one of those pieces where you can have, regardless of what package you're in within JumpCloud. And for those who don't know, you can actually create a free account for up to 10 users for free. And so you're able to try this out, demo it, make sure that it works within your environment, and you can start to see that integration flow between those identities, between Workspace and JumpCloud. All right, we have one more come in, a little bit more specific, but so they're currently on G Suite Business. What features will not be available to me? Of all the things that we've described, if I'm on G Suite Business, what's not available?
I can take that one. So question is, if I'm on G Suite Business, which features will not be available to me? So that would really depend on which plan you move to. I would say the plan that most closely resembles your current G Suite Business plan is going to be Business Plus. Business Plus will include pretty much everything that you have in G Suite Business. If you were to jump up to, say, an enterprise level plan, everything in those enterprise level plans, or everything in that G Suite Business plan, will be included in both of those enterprise plans. You would get some added feature functionality, again, primarily on the security side, if you did jump up to one of those enterprise plans. But if you wanted to stay within that business family, you'd be looking at either Business Standard or Business Plus, with Business Plus leaning a little bit more closely to your current feature set. So it's tough to kind of just say, blanket statement, this is what is exactly G Suite Business, without kind of a back and forth dialogue. But Business Standard and Business Plus would be kind of the starting points.
Okay, perfect. We have another one that's kind of in a similar vein. So what options are there for an enterprise workspace customers in making identity-only accounts, say for students, members, or people that wouldn't require full staff resources?
I can take this question here. So on the student front, that's where you're definitely going to look at the Google Workspace for Education plans. The education plans have options for if you're a not-for-profit school, you can get this platform for free. If you need some more features and you want like a higher education plan, it will also give you those options to basically have like a free student user account. If you're not in education, on the flip side, we have a new SKU that was released this year. It's called the Frontline Worker SKU. So the Frontline Worker SKU is a super lightweight user plan. It gives you 2 GB of storage, still gives you all of the enterprise grade access for managing those users. So you still have all the same mobile device management settings, endpoint management settings. But again, this is more designs for like frontline workers who are, simply maybe like a deskless worker or like a factory worker or somebody who doesn't need that that high storage need, for example.
Perfect. We kind of an interesting one that just came in too. I'm curious. So, the question is, how do we handle, baby boomers who you just can't seem to give up Outlook, and they're really looking for it. And I think the notion here is that it wasn't that reliable. So I guess I'm curious from your perspective, what does that look like when you're transitioning folks, from Outlook into this new world?
Yeah, and so this is definitely where we rely on the partners to help set up the Google Sync for Microsoft Outlook. So I know you mentioned here, the old GSSML was not reliable. I'm not sure when specifically you were referring to that, but especially during this whole pandemic, I think Google has spent a lot of attention on, how do we make it easy for all users, not just, the new workforce that's necessarily used to using Gmail, but also for, people who like Outlook and don't want to part with that. So there's been a lot of work that has been done to improve that integration already. But again, at the end of the day, we rely on those partners to make sure that you guys are set up properly and you have a really easy, smooth transition. So long story short, that tool, I know it had problems in the past. It's improved a lot, especially with this whole focus of work from home.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so another question is this integration new, and how many customers are leveraging that? And I can take this. And so the integration is not new. However, just like anything else in software, we continue to enhance it and make it better. And so what you've seen over time is kind of not only the ability to import users, but also do that a little bit more cleanly, and you're syncing different identities and attributes, and now group management and all of those different components to enhance it over time. And this is an integration that a lot of our customers leverage. And so when you're thinking about kind of that two modes of all of the, say, other IT resources that you need, right? Access into your devices, and can I hop into the network, and all those different components. What we really allow you to do is access and authenticate and get into the pieces that you need to operate your work. Where what we find is within a lot of our customers, that's where the work is done, is essentially where we're living within our workspace environment. And so it's really common for those two pieces to be tied at an identity level. And there's a second follow-on question, so I'll kind of continue on with this notion. But when you're using SSO and JumpCloud, how do you handle all those users, or is there a way to log in without the SSO for some user accounts? And so this is a common question that we get a lot in terms of how you're thinking about that identity. And again, it comes back to authentication and access. And so really, when we're talking about this direct integration between Workspace and JumpCloud, we are managing those identities in kind of that flow. But what we have yet to introduce is kind of how those employees kind of access those resources outside of that. And so you kind of have your traditional flow of, well, I can log in through my Workspace account and kind of have everything there. But then what you're able to do as well is within JumpCloud's SSO features, you're able to have that serve as a launchpad, not only into specific Workspace applications, so that saves some time if people are looking to hop into Drive, or kind of they just want that one-stop shop. And again, it's really easy for a lot of our users, since we're also typically managing that device as well, is to go at the device level, kind of open up their profile and hop right into all of the applications that they have from an SSO perspective. So that way it's really seamless. There's already kind of authentication that's taking into account in the background, kind of through WebAuthn and understanding that account profile, but then take you right into your Workspace environment. So from an end user's perspective, it's really seamless, but then also from your perspective as an IT professional, you can manage kind of how visibility you want that, and kind of what that flow looks like best for your users, just as you always have. Okay, so I think we were able to cover most of the big questions. We'll give folks just a couple more minutes to see if there's any last minute questions we want to submit. We can tackle those before we get on with our days. One more question that actually just came in around so data retention and compliance, and this might actually fall a little bit more on the Google side. And so one of the things we're looking at is Google Vault for retention and compliance and other areas. What plan is best for that person, or kind of looking for those types of enhanced security controls?
Yep, I can take that one. Thanks, Chase. So between the 6 different workspace plans, 3 of the plan offerings provide Google Vault included within the license type. So within that business family, the 3 separate plans, starter, standard, and plus, business plus is going to be the only plan that includes Google Vault. Once you move up to the enterprise family plans, enterprise standard and enterprise plus will include Vault. I'm not sure, Pippa, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure Enterprise Essentials includes Vault, but I know Business Plus, Enterprise Standard, and Enterprise Plus are the only plans that include Vault. Could you confirm on that, Pippa?
Yeah, the Enterprise Essentials plan, just for you, for those who are not familiar, the Enterprise Essentials plan is basically a no email plan. So it gives you Google Drive and Google Meet, so no email there, and that does include Vault. So it will include all of the same security settings as like the Enterprise Plus plan, which is our highest grade security plan, but again, no email on that plan.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. So it looks like we got one final question, and I think we can go ahead and wrap today's webinar. But the last question that comes in is, so far we've talked a lot about JumpCloud and Workspace, but what about all of those who require access outside to other cloud applications outside of Workspace and kind of in addition to this? So I can take this and talk a little bit more around kind of what this looks like within that environment. So again, I'd say coming back to the SSO notion, we'll kind of open that aperture a little bit. And so when we're thinking about access into different applications, so here within Workspace, it's nice because we're managing that identity as well, but we can actually do that in a couple different ways across other applications too. And we do that primarily through the use of protocols. So you've heard me mention Radius a little bit earlier and kind of how we're managing that network authentication. And when we're managing other cloud applications, there's a couple other protocols we'll leverage there too. First being SAML, and then the other being SCIM. And so within our SSO catalog, we have, I forget the number, but now 700 plus applications that can be added into how you're managing your environment. But then what we've also done is we created these tools to actually help create generic applications of that. So even if it's not within our catalog, which is growing, you can still have access to that. But then when we're thinking about that user authentication, typically we'll manage SAML, so that way you can say, okay, we understand who this identity is, and we'll now give them access into that application, which is very helpful from the end user's perspective. But what we're starting to see too from an industry is kind of adoption more of the SCIM protocol. And then this is really nice because what it does is it also takes on that extra load, if you will, of managing that identity. And so with SAML, you're able to leverage kind of some just-in-time, so you can actually create that identity as you're creating the account. But when you're leveraging a SCIM protocol, you can actually have a little bit more of a full lifecycle management. So that way, when you are creating identities and you have a SCIM application set up with JumpCloud and kind of within your group settings, what is also happening is you're also creating that identity within those applications. And then similarly, when you're removing that, it's like anything else in the world of kind of software. It kind of also depends on who the other party is. So it really depends on what the other software provider has in terms of their licensing. Not everyone provides kind of SAML or SCIM out of the box, or if they do, it might be in a couple different levels. So it really depends on the end target application that you're looking to access directly. But in general, there's a couple different ways that you can manage that identity lifecycle outside of just this direct integration with Workspace itself. Oh, all right, we'll have one more quick one come in and see if we can tackle it, because I think it is relevant for those that are kind of starting to think about, okay, what are all the other pieces? Can I sync attributes to users? And yes, you can. And so this is really nice as you're starting to think about as you add in more information. And so over time, just like people themselves, right? We tend to collect a little bit more attributes and kind of who we are as people in the world. And that's not to say that our digital identity can't do that either. And so what we're able to do then is add in those attributes from the JumpCloud side and then bring those into Workspace. So that way, all of that information stays in sync and you're understanding kind of who this individual is, how they have access over time. And again, this kind of comes back to this notion too around authorization and access, because privileges change. Some people might be promoted for a little bit in terms of their access, and then it might need to be revoked, or their roles change or other pieces. So by also managing a lot of those attributes too, you can have a better sense of where this individual is and truly what their level of access should be. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today's webinar. I had a great time kind of talking through all these different components, and I hope you did too. And I really want to thank our guest speakers today, Austin and Pippa, for your insight and kind of how you've seen that transition in your world as well. If you have questions around JumpCloud or Google Workspaces, please follow up with both of us and our teams. We'll be happy to take those questions outside of this forum as well. And we hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Thank you again so much for joining us.